Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Punch Kick Choke Chat. My name is Sean Benson. I'm one of your hosts, and we're going to jump right in here with Sensei Phil Duncan. And I am so excited to ask this first question. Sensei, and you'll understand why when you hear Sensei Dauphin's introduction in about 10 minutes. Sensei, we tend to not get political on this show. So without going overtly to any one, this or that, as a martial artist who is very familiar with firearms and different force multipliers, I want to ask your opinion on, is it okay to use extreme force to defend your home and your property?
Well, yes, that's a very good question. I never thought this would be the first question, but very good, right? You know what? Yeah, because of the Canadian laws and where we are, I know there's a recent home invasion that happened the other day. The person was cleared. I'm always at the point where you use as much force as necessary. I'm sure you've heard that before. The Canadian courts have deemed that if someone breaks into your house and has no weapons, and again, it depends on your perception, then you're not allowed to. You should subdue them, hand to hand, control tactics. That's why the grappling is so good in that context, and other arts, and call the police. But we have a saying that it's better to be judged by 12, right, than carried by 6. So I always tell people, and you have to be alive first. And if you think your life's on the line, and it's all about articulation, right? Articulate why you use force, why you did what you did. If you think your family members are in harm's way, serious harm's way, then you do what you have to do. That's my personal opinion. And then you can't control what the courts do. You have to, have good faith, regardless if you get charged or not. But you have to be alive, and as long as you're a good person and you've done what you thought you had to do. If someone has a firearm and they're pointing it at you, you have to act accordingly, depending on your skill set. Sometimes you can de-escalate it and give the person what they want, but if you get that gut feeling, you might have to act, right? And it's totally up to the situation.
Right on. I appreciate that. And I'm asking this in a martial arts mindset, not a political one, because I'm actually watching the show Shogun right now, which I love. And it's such an intense reminder of a certain samurai code and a certain samurai ethos. And it makes me wonder, how much force is too much, or how much is absolutely the right amount for someone to experience consequences. So let me throw this to you, Sensei Dauphin. What do you think about proper use of force related to property, and somebody, entering your home or trying to get your car keys?
Oh man, my proclivity for violence is high. Sensei Suino and I were talking about this, that it's very interesting when you're a martial artist, how you don't actually really want to hurt anybody ever, but we're the type of people who don't shy away from it. And maybe there's still a little spark inside of you that's hoping it might happen. Right. So, Sensei Legacy taught me this a long time ago, probably when I was a yellow belt or a green belt, that you need to contemplate things before they happen. Because if you wait for them to happen, then you're going to be in a deficit.
Sure.
And it's interesting how over the decades, things have changed for me as a martial artist. Like as a green belt, purple belt, brown belt, I was like, do anything and I'll fight you. Like do anything. And now after like 3.5 decades, it's that those lines are different. But I will tell you, if you come in my house, not through the front door and uninvited at 2 o'clock in the morning, you might not find a really good response from me. Allegedly, the thing behind my head right now, I might know how to use it, and it might actually be something that you don't want me to use on you. And like yourself, Sensei Benson and Sensei Duncan, and I know Sensei Suino, I am also a firearms enthusiast. And so, hey, if you come in here uninvited and intend to take something from me or hurt somebody in this house, you might not find a good response from me, allegedly.
Thanks, Sensei Nova.
Yeah, Sensei Duncan, don't come and get me, okay? I'm a really nice person. As Sensei McLaren would say, I'm a nice person. Okay?
I'm retired, so it won't be me.
Sensei Nova, I thought we figured this out. You're a good person. You're not necessarily a nice person.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
I think we did that math. Before we go to you, Sensei Suino, I actually want to ping back to you, Sensei Duncan, because Sensei Nova said something that's really interesting. And I think if we're honest, at some point in our martial arts career, it's true for every person, is you've been in some pretty extreme situations, and we will get to those throughout the interview. Do you still have a little spark where you kind of hope somebody does the thing? Or are you through so many episodes of that you're like, no, I just actually hope no one ever does?
Very good question. Yeah, the spark is still there, but I think the maturity level is like the other day, I inadvertently might have cut someone out in the parking lot of a mall, and my wife and kids were in the car. And the old Phil, I was up putting my hand to say sorry, and this guy gave me the finger and was going to get his car towards me. And then the spark, like you said, came out. So I got out of the car and he says, "You got something to tell me?" And I used some explicit word. Shut. My wife's like, "Phil, the kids are with us." So I knew I was on camera. I shut the door before the kids were. I have smaller kids later in life, like they're 7 to 5, right? So I shut the door, and I knew this car is pretty soundproof. Told him exactly what I thought about him. We're not going to fight or anything. He saw the glare in my eye. He turned around, went, and he stayed inside the gas cashiers for 15 minutes. And my wife's like, "Wow, I've seen this. He didn't come out. Was he afraid or anything like that?" Like that. And as soon as we drove away, he came out, staring like. So you can't. What does the old say? You can't stop at every barking dog, but you can yell at someone the other time. And I felt bad. I'm like questioning, did I do the right thing or whatever? And I'm like, no, you know what? Sometimes some people are ignorant. You can tell them how you are. You can have that exchange and keep going. But yeah, I've been in so many situations. I think, and from my training, I'm sure you all have yours, is that I can catch myself. I wouldn't go anything physical. Me, I think about creating, God forbid I was in that situation, I would stay in my vehicle, create positive witnesses until I had to do something, right? I would never initiate anything. My whole thing is creating positive witnesses. I am able to think under stress very good because of years. So initially I knew where the cameras were. I knew there was witnesses. And so my whole thing is, I'll be on the defensive unless I have to really defend my family or whatever. But it is part, sorry.
Oh, not at all. No, I like that. It doesn't mean we don't have the same reaction. We just don't follow through necessarily. Sensei Suino, where do you go with that first question about, again, this will sound political, but can you protect your property with something more extreme? Or as a martial artist, do we actually have responsibility to not do that? Where do you go? Or as a samurai, do you go consequences? You got what you got. You reach.
Hey, let's preface this, Benson, by letting everybody know that Sensei Suino is a lawyer and he teaches the course in the United States for handguns. So
yeah.
Well, so I know the law, right? I have to have an honest and reasonable belief that the force is necessary because I'm facing an imminent danger. And the force has to be commensurate with the threat. But I think Sensei Duncan said something very interesting. Right? You got to be able to tell the story, and if you could say this, if somebody stops you on the street, takes your wallet, you could say, well, they're just taking my property. I hope you're right about that in the moment, right? Because a lot of people that come and take your wallet might also be people that will do you harm in some way. And I want to be as ethical and moral as possible. And if I don't have to, interact with somebody in a violent way, I would prefer not to. At the same time, if someone takes my wallet, I think I have a reason to believe that they might wish to do me more harm. In which case, in the aftermath, I have to be able to tell the story and explain to the judge and jury why I had that honest and reasonable belief that there was a threat of force. I would do my best to tell that story. I think, morally, aside from the law, morally, I think if someone does you harm, if someone comes to get your wallet or breaks into your house or threatens your child or your wife or your girlfriend, I think morally they've given up the right to bodily health and well-being. So to the extent that I'm somebody who can deliver the force of morality, I think it's up to me to teach them that they shouldn't be doing those things. How's that sound?
Honestly, Sensei Phil sounds great to me. I won't take long with this because I'm going to reiterate what you're saying before we go to Hanshi Legacy. But I believe that once you color outside the lines, you don't get to come back inside the lines and claim the protection of the very thing you said no to 30 seconds earlier. You know, there was a guy in Barcelona punching people on the subway platform. He knocked a woman down, busted her eardrum, and I was just like, and he was a known criminal. He'd been caught before, and I was like, why are we keeping this guy alive? Like, he just goes around hurting people. Like, and I'm even that extreme with it in my head. Now, societally, I don't think we can apply these things fairly, but morally and conceptually, I'm with you, Sensei. So, you know, like, if you could remove the fact that we know that people are on death row who don't deserve to be there, then I'm all for, like, you're out, buddy. In any case, I like your morality versus legality. I think
What about curiosity though, Ben? It's like we've all studied a lot of shit. I'm curious about how it works in certain situations. Can we not claim curiosity for some things?
Hanshi, what about you? You actually, if I may, surprised me about 30 eps ago talking about if somebody grabs you, and you had a very tempered opinion where you just said, if you can not hurt the person and end the thing, that's his martial artist responsibility. And I was expecting a more severe response from you. So where do you go with this today?
Well, we're talking about home invasion and different things like that. So
Yeah.
I just want to first make a statement that I was reading in the paper today. I read the news every day that a police officer fired his gun during a confrontation with someone, and he wasn't charged because he went to court and he was found to have pulled his gun out, you know, in self-defense. So if we fire a gun and a police officer whose job it is to defend the people, if he fires a gun and he can be charged for just firing the gun, I would find it probably very difficult to get away with if we had a gun and pulled one out. I mean, this is in Canada. United States, I know it's quite different. I got a couple of rides from a couple of karate masters, and they hand me a gun and tell me to put it in the glove compartment. So I just want to make that statement. But what I would like to ask Sensei Duncan would for the people watching,
Right.
if you somebody did invade your house and you defended yourself by way of just using your hands,
Right.
or if you picked up a weapon and hit somebody on the head and brained them, what would be the different charges? If you punched somebody in the face and knocked them out, or if you picked up a weapon and knocked somebody down, would that be a different charge, or would they look at that in a different way?
Great question. Yes, it would be a different charge. So just hands alone, if you break, it's called ABH, assault bodily harm, wounds, maims, disfigures. So you can consent to a common assault, a common fight, but you can't consent to ABH, assault bodily harm. So if you break someone's nose or you disfigure them, stuff like that with hand to hand, it's assault the charge would be kind of assault causing bodily harm. Now, like you said, sir, that if Hanshi, if you use a weapon, it would be assault with a weapon, which is a higher grade of a charge, right? If you did get charged, right? But depending on the situation, and if I may, just to go back quickly to the first question, Sensei Benson, is I had a different mindset when I was actively doing undercover work, because routinely organized crime, gangs, the terrorists would say, I'm going to hunt you down and set a hit squad to come and send a mission to come get you. I was in a different world, so I was less, I'm still aware all the time. I do counter surveillance, so I probably would have acted in a different way than I do now post the job. But you're absolutely right. I still believe that you should be able to defend yourself, but articulate. Last thing I'll say on that, 99% of the police out there, 99.9 are legally bound or lawful. They just can't explain themselves sometimes in court. They don't know how to articulate themselves. Maybe not to go down that road. They don't write notes proper enough, but the majority of people, if you can explain yourself and you're articulate, even criminals. I mean, criminals get off on self-defense. I had informants that had home invasions. They stabbed a guy, almost killed him, put him in a colostomy bag, and because they were able to explain themselves, the charges were dropped, even though it's criminal and criminal, right? That makes any sense?
It doesn't make sense, but it does make
Yeah,
sense.
I was just gonna say. And thanks so much, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, he just said some stuff that let's move on from this so you know who we're talking to and why they're talking about being undercover and having terrorists threaten them. My name's Sean Benson. If you're watching on YouTube and you hit that subscribe and you hit that like button, we love you. And metaphorically, we're sending you a punch, kick, choke, chat mug. If you're listening on that podcast, drive safe, bake well, and we're so happy you're with us. But if you're here with us tonight on the Zoom, we love this because you're here in real time and you can ask us questions through the chat button at the bottom, and that makes you a part of this living history. Sensei Duncan said some real nice things to us at the beginning because we really do take care to try and create something that lives on, not just for you in a week, but maybe for future generations. And we want you to be a part of that. So that red button's going to light up in the chat and you can throw your questions there. Boom, there it is. But now I want to just very simply introduce my co-host, Sensei Randy Dauphin, Sensei Nicholas Suino, and Hanshi Gary Legacy. And I've talked about this before. I just want to talk about volume. Friday night, we fight stand-up. Friday night, we grapple. Saturday, all-day sword with the first ever tournament that Sensei Suino could talk about if he wants briefly. Sunday, some more Iaido. Hanshi Legacy goes down and teaches Sensei Dauphin's class. I'm teaching my class. We just all spent so much time together doing so many things. And that's it. That's my intro, is that as martial artists, we find each other, we get on the floor together, we wear our gis, we don't talk about it. The talk comes later, before or after, but the training's the point. And I'm really glad that those are my teachers and role models.
Thanks, Benz.
Yeah.
So my introduction for Sensei Duncan, who I don't, before 15 minutes ago, we've never interacted or talked to each other, but you'll see us periodically typing Sensei Duncan, and in the group chat, it's already come up. Love this guy. This vibe is great. So things are going really good already. What I want to tell everybody about Sensei Duncan is if you haven't noticed, he's an accomplished security professional. He has over 27 years in public and private sector, 23 years of which are with the Toronto Police Service. Some of the areas of expertise that he has are security management, executive protection, covert operations, community safety, and risk. Sensei has conducted over 1,500 undercover investigations, which include but are not limited to homicide, international firearms trafficking, gang, drug, human trafficking, and whatever traditional organized crime investigation is. Let's crack that open. What is traditional organized crime? Okay. In his role, he has conducted upwards of 300 active entry search warrants and over 700 high-risk vehicle takedowns. He's considered a subject matter expert in the use of force, undercover officer safety, and is an expert witness, which, again, articulation. He's currently head of the community safety and security for City Housing Hamilton. He's responsible for safety and well-being over 15,000 tenants and 150 staff and the visitors that come there. Subject matter expert in plainclothes and undercover close quarter survival with 15 years of plainclothes and undercover expertise. So now we'll just get into the martial arts. He's been a martial artist for over 40 years, so not a quitter, right? He's been active in martial arts for over 40 years. He's a 5th degree black belt, master instructor in Russian close quarters combat Sambo. He's a 1st degree black belt in Filipino martial arts, and he's also studied judo, Japanese jiu-jitsu, and boxing. And while like I said, I don't know Sensei Duncan, but one of the things that strikes me about him and that I was thinking about when I was working out is similar things to when we've talked to Hanshi Montalvo and other people who work in the realm of law enforcement or military personnel, is not going to be easily impressed by your dojo victory, right? He's not a person who's going to be like, oh yeah, you're super skilled. Way to beat up that person who walked in the door of your dojo. It's going to take a little more for you to impress a person like this with your martial arts abilities. And yeah, and I'm really looking forward to this. And Sensei Duncan, really excited to have you here. I know we're going to learn a lot from you. And thank you so much for coming on.
No, thank you all, everyone. I'm the one that should be thankful because I'm around great martial artists, and again, I'm always learning and open-minded, and I really appreciate to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So let's jump right in, Sensei Duncan. What was it like growing up for you? You know, how was your childhood leading into what brought you to your first martial art?
It was pretty good. I was born in Toronto, and at 4 years old, my parents they were married young, had me at 18. But back then, you could get a good job. So Dad moved us to St. Catharines in Niagara. I was 4 years old, and then I was in sports at 5 years old, baseball. That's my love. And then I had a lot of single parent friends. I never realized it until I started thinking about it the last couple of days after watching a couple of your podcasts. And I'd say about 9 years old was my first instance where I had a pair of boxing gloves. I had a friend whose dad was a boxing coach, and he was 9 boxing and 10-year-old, I guess back then. That would have been 1979. I was born in 1970. And his father would put the gloves on and teach me what his son knew. So that wasn't that was just more in his garage and all that. And then I had two friends. One was 10 years old. He was a kickboxing novice. His mother was single, and he had some anger issues. And he's my buddy, and she put him, and he won the 10 fighting under at 10 years old kickboxing. So we used to beat the crap out of each other. And then my other buddy at 13, who became a cop, who had a big influence on me, Mike Peachy, and he's a 3-time Golden Glove champ. Fought a couple world champions in the amateur, like Billy Irwin. Is from Niagara, and Mike Strange and Chris Johnson, who I think fought for a world title, maybe against Roy Jones, if I remember, or didn't win. But anyway, at 13, he brought me to Port Dalhousie Boxing Club in St. Catharines, and that was my first official in the boxing ring. Growing up, my father at about 6, 7, we would always watch the fights. He was my influence. He wasn't a martial artist, but a good athlete. And he loved Muhammad Ali, and my mother loved Ken Norton. And the only time we would be able to eat away from the kitchen dinner table is when there was a big fight on. And then we were able to eat downstairs. And I look forward to it. So, and then, yeah, that was the first time he wouldn't let me box because I guess I was smart in school. He had a cousin that had a gym in Toronto. And at 15, I sparred for years. And I guess I beat a couple Golden Glove champs in sparring, 10 fights, just novice, 10 fighting under, and they want me to fight. And my dad wouldn't let me. So, but I used to spar all the time. He knew. I didn't think he knew, but he knew. And, you know, where am I going for 2 hours after school, right? To stay and play with friends and come back with a bumper bruise or a little bit of black eye. He knew. So he let me do it without even realizing. But yeah, that's how I started.
And do you think it was just sparring with those buddies before you were actually formally training, or do you think there's something innate that made you a little extra talented at this? I mean, and then one question I want to combine with that is, at what age did you kind of go, I want to do this for the rest of my life in some form or not?
Yeah, I think because what I didn't know is later on in life, I had 2 uncles from Nova Scotia out east that were renowned street fighters. So it's in the blood fighting, and then they moved to Ottawa, and I even saw a couple of they weren't bad people, but a couple of the Duncan brothers, the uncles, clearing bars and stuff like that in the blood. I have a grandfather who I didn't know, but he was in the Korean War, and my other grandfather was in World War II as a medic because he had a problem leg, so he was a medic. But just I guess the fighting instinct and was in my blood, and athleticism. I've always been in sports my whole life. My brother went to Olympics twice for Canada, and was an All-American in the States, my younger brother. So it was always in the blood, athletics. But I think maybe 6 months into boxing, when I was 13, they put me, I remember like it was yesterday, they put me in with a 26-year-old, it seemed like a man to me, who's twice my age. and it was supposed to be sparring, my first time in the ring, and he almost knocked my head off. And I remember the trainer said, "Phil, you've got talent." I go, "What?" I go, "You almost knocked my head off." And I was the skinniest kid till I hit grade 11, right? I was the smallest skinny. He goes, "I've never seen such speed. You're like Mike." I go, "What do I do?" He goes, "Double jab and right hook and move away from his right." Move to the left. I said, "Okay." Second round, it was about tie. I almost gave up. I'm like, to answer what you said, there was something inside me that said, I want to knock this guy out, right? Like he's punching. I was getting mad every time he was punching me. I was slipping. Third round, I broke his nose, TKO'd him, and he quit before I quit. And that's when I think maybe I have something inside to fight a grown man.
I know.
So I think, thank God he didn't knock me out the first round, and maybe I wouldn't have continued.
Right on. Sensei Dauphin, I want to just throw this one to you real quick. I know you grew up around some tough uncles, some uncles with the reputation. Do you think that helped your martial arts? Do you think that's something that you it gave you a sense of what the fighting world could be, or do you think it's something that you had to shed?
Oh man. I always say in the beginning, I wasn't good at anything in martial arts. Like I was not, I've said this before, like Sensei Legacy, when I got my yellow belt, he tied my yellow belt around my waist and he said, "You by far were not the best person in this grading." Right.
Oh, wow.
And right. But then he also said, but if I was going to pick anybody to be a black belt, I would pick you. Right.
Wow.
So that's
Awesome.
so, and so definitely it helped me, Sean, being around uncles, like, you know, Sensei Duncan probably arrested some of them. They were in outlaw motorcycle clubs, and they used to like to hit me and shove me around because they thought that would make me tough. And it definitely did make me tough, right? And so in a way, like mentally and physically, when I joined karate eventually at 18, and people were hitting me and punching me, I could just take a couple of extra hits that other people couldn't take. And so then as a result of that, you know, when somebody was good at something off the hop and they could land their reverse punch like on the first time and I couldn't, and I had to get hit 17 or 700 times before I could do it, there is a deeper level of knowledge, I believe. The only other thing I was better at than other people was being a student. I just trusted my teacher. When Sensei Legacy told me to do something, I just did it. And I just believed him because when I watched, he could do it. And those are the only two things. So I think it was good that I was tough, that I got pushed around by my uncles and kicked around. That helped me.
Mhm.
And good that I was disciplined. My mom taught me to listen and respect people who knew more than me, and I could be a good student.
Thanks, Sensei. Let's bring it back to you, Sensei Duncan. So, you know, you're young, you're fit, you're smart, your dad's not letting you fight. So what does the unfolding of your late teens look like as you both educate yourself, but also keep training? Talk us through that.
Yeah, no, thanks. So yeah, I continued through high school, played all kinds of sports like everyone else did, football, basketball, and continued the boxing training when I could. And then when I went to university, um, I played. I was supposed to play football, but I missed football training camp in Ottawa, Carleton. So I played rugby, and we didn't have rugby in Niagara. But it was a way you could. I said, "What? You can hit people without equipment?" And for my size, I was very aggressive, I guess. And then so played rugby for a year, and then went to Beaver Boxing in Ottawa. So I trained at Beaver Boxing, and I found out that I wasn't in quite the shape. Same kind of similar thing happened. I was with an Ontario champ, and I TKO'd him, and then the Canadian champ, Open champ, got upset. And I realized I wasn't in the shape. I was in rugby shape, but I wasn't in boxing shape. And I'll never forget what the trainer said. I was 20 years old, and I got about 5 or 6. They put me in the ring three rounds. I controlled the Ontario champ, beat him, and then the Canadian champ gave me about 5 or 6 unanswered shots. Never hurt me. I've never been hurt in the ring, but I was so tired I couldn't even open my. And then he goes, "Wow." We became really good friends. He was a street guy. I just remember his nickname was Red because he had red hair. And he's like, "How could you take my punches?" And then I said, "Well, I felt so bad because I couldn't even defend myself. I was so tired." And the coach goes, "Hey, you don't box to get in shape. You get in shape to box. And you might be in rugby shape, but you're not in boxing shape." And then they wanted me to fight, but then I had to pay my way to school, and So they let me come to the gym, and it was only maybe $20 back in 1989, 90, through the 90s. And then I played, then I finished university in 93, met a judo master in St. Catharines, 4 wins judo, and I did judo for a couple of years. Really loved that. That was my first, I never did high school wrestling, but judo master. And until he unfortunately moved. His daughter was very good, and he moved to the Toronto area. And then from there, I went back to Ottawa in 95, was a network engineer. You wouldn't know it now, but I was a techie back then in 95. And then December 6th, 96, I got on the job. Moved from Ottawa, went to the 6 months, obviously OPC, to Police College, and then met one of the most influential men in my life, the first one of 2. Some of you might know him, Hanshi Legacy, you might know him. Jan Crayfield. He was a legend in Canadian police. He was like the other side of Tom Sharkey, if you've heard that name at all. He was ex-commando in Royal Marines in Dutch, lived in the jungles for 4 years, fighting people, killing people, and then he was a legionnaire in Africa for 10 to 15 years, and then a mercenary, and then he put me under his wing and said, come to my combat jiu-jitsu, if you don't want me to stop there, and then in 97, I started training with him under his combat classical jiu-jitsu, but it was like his jungle fighting and all that. But he had a big effect on my outlook and my resilience and my survival mindset.
That's amazing. Now, I actually do want to jump right into the concept of combat jiu-jitsu. So you've got boxing, which we all know, killer hands. Then you jump to judo, which we all respect so deeply around here. How did you then find combat jiu-jitsu handed to you by somebody who literally behind enemy lines had to do and use this? How did you find that your experience related, and how did you find that it didn't?
Well, he quickly, because if I can backtrack quickly, I took my dad in 95 to, was it UFC 5 or 6? One of the early ones in Buffalo.
That'd be then.
So I thought, and that was when Marco Ruas fought a big polar bear, Vargas or whatever like that, and he kicked him 20, yeah, I remember that. So I thought MMA, and I still respect MMA, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't until John Crayfield took me and said, listen, people are literally said in the parking lot in June of 97 when I met him, he just happened to be my sergeant, right place, the right time, at the right person. He said, people are going to try to kill you. You need to come to my class. So I quickly learned, to answer your question, that there's sport, even though it prepares you. He said I had that survival mindset. I could take a lot of punishment. I had a high pain threshold, but he quickly taught me how in 2 to 5 seconds the fight should be over. And he was also a judo master. And he says, but I teach my combatives like this. And yeah, just a legend of a man. He unfortunately passed away about 5 years ago. He'd be in his early 80s now, but he was a legend. And I quickly knew that there was a difference between reality or combatives, that they call it, self-defense. But obviously the sport fighting helped with the timing, flexibility, balance. But there was a difference between what he knew and what I knew at the time, 100%.
Hanshi Legacy, I want to throw this one to you because you have a similar experience, if I'm not mistaken, where you had your teachers, you had your martial art, and then you meet Hanshi Sandoval, who's quite literally, I believe, the second most highly decorated Marine in all of Vietnam, and did solo recon behind enemy lines. So now you're learning from somebody who's maybe used it a little more deeply. Did that change your perspective, and how?
Yeah, I think there are 2 different mindsets, if I may say this. When you're in the MMA, for instance, there's a referee, you're possibly going to walk out of there. Yes, there's a competition going on. Yes, there are certain rules, but when you're in the street, when you may have a drug-crazed person, or the environment is different. It's an open environment. The guy doesn't care that you take karate. He can use anything that's available to him. And then I think it was Randy and I were watching something the other day, and it sort of went around this, where guys out there don't care what you've done. Like their street fighters are pretty tough. And Sensei Sandoval had all that experience. We were watching some documentary or something like this, and the guy just went right straight to the guy and was just throwing this guy around. It was just different than playing the game. So I find because he was throwing somebody around, Anthony Sandoval was throwing people around so easily. I thought, well, I'm going to be able to do that. You're in real combat there. There's a real psychological or mental difference when you're fighting. You're facing somebody for your life. And Sensei Sandoval gave us that edge. Remember, we're nerve striking. We're destroying people's lives. So it's a different mindset.
Thanks, Hanchi. Sensei Duncan, let's bring it back now. You're walking through the door of legit combat jiu-jitsu, but also your career, which is now putting you into situations. So yeah, keep walking us through this timeline. This is so fascinating about how your martial arts is unfolding as your career, and maybe your need for martial arts is unfolding.
Oh yeah, like I started in Parkdale, and there was a lot of well, we had a couple of people in our division who were ex-Vietnam vets, but I don't want to disrespect them in any means. But Crayfield was the top of the food chain there, and like you said, I come across. I mean, just the first night I was a rookie, and I remember my training officer. There was all kinds of experience back then, 10, 15, 20 years of training, right? And to make a long story short, the first shift, it was very boring. And then the last 10 minutes, we got into a pursuit, some gangs, stole a prostitute's car, get into and that initiative. And then he says, get out and chunk 15 minutes. We're in, he's like, what's the speed? 120, there's no GPS back then. He goes, tell him we're going 50 to dispatcher. And you can hear the engine. And I'm like, he goes, are you scared? I said, no, this is why I joined the job. Put my seatbelt on. I was scared. I was just didn't want to admit it, right? I was scared of my life. How I didn't soil myself, I don't know. It was almost like it was yesterday. And the whole time I'm thinking, how does Simon know how to get into these laneways and all that? But he knew that, like, about anyway. We pinned him in, and he yells out, "Chunk him!" And I'm like, "What's chunk?" He goes, "Put your gun to his head and rip him out." Like this. There was three of them. I went to my side, put my gun to. Luckily, I didn't, shoot him and kill him. Ripped him out. I was so jacked up, and then I went home. I had a raw, never slept. Went back to the next shift. This is what I dreamed. And then as time progressed, and under Crayfield's tutelage, I would always be known as one of the go-to young people for any type of takedowns. I was one of Crayfield's guys. You didn't bother him. He was like a mafia don. He'd be in Kensington Market, having a drink after work, and he talked to him, and just the respect. If he thought I didn't even compare myself to him, but there's a couple of us that he thought were like him and had that survival mindset, and he took us under that wing. And you're right, I did use it a lot, especially downtown Toronto, right? It was pretty rough back then. It still is now, I guess.
Hey, Sean, I just want to ask Sensei Duncan, did you know Leo at all? Leo Laux?
Crayfield, if you ask Leo, they were very tight. Leo no Jan Crayfield. I only knew him a couple of times, but he was that generation. So he wouldn't, if you talk to Leo and ask about Jan Crayfield, he'll definitely have some stories of his own.
Yeah, we know Leo really well. He got his black belt from Sensei Legacy and trained with him for decades. So yeah, he's good friends with us.
But well, he's the reason we went to Canadian Police and from the Monadnock Crayfield to the straight stick. He thought the Monadnock was a better, superior defensive, but it took too long, and we didn't have enough time. They said he was the head OPC instructor. They promoted him to get him off the street. He was hurting people. They made him a sergeant, and just to get him off the road. But yeah, he was. And then at the same time, I was training in Sistema from '97 to 2001. And in 2001, I met my eventually master, the Russian fellow.
So before we jump into that, I have a question that we got before the show from one of my students. He's a second degree black belt. He's done full contact fighting. Alden Adair's his name. And he wanted to know, because he's so curious about where that rubber really meets the road, is this might be too broad a question, but as you're jumping into this police work, he simply asks, what is the best way to break a man?
Well, depends on the situation, but I think 9 times out of 10, I'll give you an example. I came on with a JTF2 Special Forces guy named Craig, and he happened to have a hook on his hand. He's in the first book of the JTF2. His accident and a grenade stun a DD went off in training. And anyway, I'm with him and I'm arresting a guy who's a champion boxer, a Downey from Nova Scotia. He's not related to me, but we know his family. And he looked at us, and we broke him by a look. He looked at my partner and he says, "You know what? I don't think Toronto Police is in the habit of hiring handicapped people just to hire handicapped people." And he looked at Craig, and Craig gave him the 1,000-mile stare, the ex-Special Forces. And he looked at me, and I looked through him, and he goes, "You know what? I think I'm going to turn around and let you put the handcuffs." And he was a well-known drug dealer, street fighter, big guy, ex-Canadian amateur champ. And we said, "You know what? That's the best decision, because we're not going to box you, right? We're not going to box you." And he didn't realize that Craig was an ex-JTF2 and I'm who I thought I was or whatever like that. But to break someone, a lot of times it's just a look, like Hanshi Legacy said, it's they can tell. We always have a saying, it takes a wolf to catch a wolf. And we're just on one side of the law, and that's how, like we're the criminals, they can sense it, right? They can sense when they look at you in your eye, whether you can back it up or you can't. If that makes any sense.
Makes sense. Sensei Suino, I want to throw it to you.
Love it, love it. Hey, listen, Sensei Duncan, I got to ask you about 2 different martial arts. I don't know anything about Sistema, but I've heard all kinds of stuff about it. And I would love to get your take on it. What is it? How does it work? How come some of the stuff out there on the internet of Sistema looks so strange? Can you kind of fill us in a little bit? Because I've never talked to anybody who's actually directly studied it before.
Good question. I want to be very careful, and I want to be very complimentary, because I don't think there's any bad martial art. But when I took it, was more hardcore. Again, I was taking Jan from 2007 to 2001 under his system, and also cross training. I actually started from January 1997, 6 months before I met Jan, obviously. And Vladimir is a great guy. I mean, he opened the dojo 93, 94, so I was kind of close to the inception. There was a lot of Special Forces guys, one guy from Israel, another Spetsnaz guy. So it's more hardcore then. And but then for 4 years I was doing that. So what you see now is more watered down than what it was then. It was more hardcore. The only reason and again, I still have friends that are very good. You just don't see them. I think the problem he has was like some martial arts is they have I don't know how you quality control. He has like 500-600 instructors, maybe 10 know what they're doing. And now he's gone into a lot of mystic stuff. Like I said, he always treated me with respect. But again, I can say it's more hardcore. But the reason I left Sistema is because I liked half of it. It was very effective. I used it on the street with Jan's Krefeld stuff. But then I was looking for a better system in the Russian side, and I found my instructor, who was the real deal, who was here 20 years even before, and no one knew. He was more selective in who he taught. So yeah, it is. I get that all the time. Everyone I say, no, it's not Sistema, even though when I took it, it was more realistic. I mean, again, I know a Russian fellow who I worked with, a cop who's very good, who makes it work. But we joke with him. When I had a combat sambo class for a couple of years, I was teaching, and BJJ was on Sunday. I was on Saturdays teaching the guys and the girls. And I'm like, why don't you? But he didn't want to go out there. He didn't want to. I said, you're one of Vladimir's top guys. Why don't you have a dojo? Why don't you go online? Why don't you promote it? Because you're very good. You have that police background. But yeah, that makes sense. So.
And if I'm understanding right, you transferred somewhat to Sambo after that, combat Sambo. Is that the sequence?
Yeah, so in 2001, you know, for me to leave, one of my regrets is to leaving Jan. He was like a second father to me. I was always around him. I went to undercover work in 2000, 2001. So, but for me to leave Jan, I just found a system which I couldn't believe that to me was more effective for what I needed. I couldn't believe it. I was searching. This gentleman, Greg, he was they didn't call it Spetsnaz back then, Special Operation Unit. He was a Cold War, he'd be like SEAL Team 6 or Delta Force in the 60s, early 70s from Russia. Immigrated to Canada in the late 70s, early 80s and started teaching. But yeah, so there's Sambo, which is obviously the sports Sambo. They call combat Sambo when MMA in the early 2000s. MMA, that's like China, which it's everything's Kung Fu. Everything in Russia is Sambo or combat Sambo. And then there's and then there's like a self-defense third, and we're the fourth, like we're the close quarter special forces combat Sambo. So so he's the Russian version of Greg. I never thought I'd meet someone and yeah, like and they knew each other from years ago, coincidentally. They had bumped paths or crossed paths. So yeah, I left for combat Sambo.
And so it sounds like you're saying it's not strictly sort of wrestling based stuff in the combat sambo. It sounds like there's a bunch of different stuff available. Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so he was a sport champion in sambo and wrestling in his youth and teenager, but this is the Crayfeld's version, right? This would be Hanshy Legacy, what your instructor in the military. This is a military system to dispatch your opponent in 2 to 5 seconds. And it's a combination of gun, knife. It's a mix of all the, you know, there's Canadian influence, American, all that. But I never seen a person who distills and it helped me the principles of survival. It's not sport. There are some sport contexts, but you know, he would never teach sport. You assume there's multiple opponents, the disarms. Yeah, it's a very military combative system, a survival system, right? It's just his version. And he never promoted it. I've met a couple other combat sambo instructors that say, no, they didn't even know he was here. Greg was here. He's the first one in Canada. And to this day, he had a website when I found him. He doesn't have a website for years. He passed away, unfortunately, just over a year ago. And he made me his successor, so miss him. But yeah, it's a very reality system, right? Like other ones.
So there's a lot of fun memes out there that'll pit Sambo against BJJ, and one will say, you know, one thing and one will say the other. And I know you've done some Japanese jiu-jitsu, and it sounds to me like we kind of know the answer, but what would you say are the significant differences when you're dealing with something like a combat sambo? We know it's a bit of an umbrella term for Russian martial arts versus something like a more codified Japanese jiu-jitsu.
I think true Japanese jiu-jitsu is very effective for military and police. Kind of similar to close quarter combat sambo, which I'm now teaching. I think combat sambo MMA, if we can call it combat sambo, is the best. Russians that do MMA combat sambo and sports sambo to combat some MMA are basically dominating MMA as we know it right now. I think in submission competitions, BJJ will dominate. But I think because they put themselves in a lot of 50% of their positions wouldn't work on the street, 50-50, all that stuff. So, and even Renzo Gracie said nobody would beat Khabib because he does train in BJJ, right? But now the Japanese jiu-jitsu that I learned, which is from Forrester lineage, Hansi Forrester and then Crayfeld, even though Crayfeld could dispatch him, but he went under Forrester, and then Greg actually got his in '82, Canadian credentials from Forrester as well, overlapping because back then Russians weren't, you know, there's a little bit of prejudice, he says, so he wanted to get a couple Canadian martial art, karate and jiu-jitsu, but real Japanese jiu-jitsu, I think is very effective, more so than MMA combat sambo or just sport jiu-jitsu for military and police in my estimation. BJJ is great. I have friends that do it and all that, but again, there are times where you won't be grappling. There are times when people are trying to, every time I had a gun point at me or rip people out trying to kill me with a Tech 9 submachine gun, I never used sport jiu-jitsu. I used my hand-to-hand combat stuff, if that makes sense. But if there are people that needs control and don't have weapons, then you can do 2-on-1s, you can do sport BJJ. There is room for everyone, right? It's just, what is your job function? My job function was to arrest the worst of the worst. So I wanted the combative self-defense stuff.
Sean, I just got to share what Sensei Wolf said when he was on the podcast with us, when people said, hey, all fights end on the ground. And Sensei Wolf said, only if you're losing, right? And he said,
I saw that.
yeah,
I
and
like
he
that.
said, if you put me in a closed guard, I'm going to punch you right in the nuts, right? So
It's funny you do that, and if I can add quickly on that, not all fights are on the ground. I fought in the car, close quarter. I fought on beds doing search warrant where people trying to, they have a knife or a gun on their bedside. I fought where someone's trying to grab you while you're sitting in the chair doing a drug deal. And his buddy fought in all kinds of, like, sometimes fought on the ground, pull out fake knives when we're training. BJJ masters, my buddies are shot Franco, 3rd, 4th degree, and slice and dice them. You know, even at OPC, I won't say any names, the masters there, slice and dice them. But I would lose if it was sport fighting, you know what I mean? So there's different levels to this, there's a different mindset. And yeah, for anyone to say all fights go to the ground, well, they've never done my type of work, that's for sure. And they never, you know, and I'm not trying to demean them in any way. They all, when you're in sport fighting, yeah, when you have a ref, like you said, on your legacy, when you have an agreed way of fighting, then yes. But I don't fight on the, we have a saying on the street, the loser bleeds, right? That's what my master used to say, Greg, all the time.
So this is an important concept, especially I think for a lot of the people who I know who are listening, and I'll include my students in that, because we want to have that mindset. We want to have a martial art that isn't the sport, right? We're training this classical art, old school street art. We bring it through to the modern times, but we are training in a dojo with one-step sparring or bunkai or good hard, you know, continuous sparring. But how does someone who's not doing the drug deal, getting into the fight once a week, once a night, how do they know that their martial art, or what would you suggest to make sure their martial art doesn't live in the sport realm, even though they're not necessarily pressure testing it the way you did?
Great question. I'm a big proponent of scenario-based training. So I did it for one client, a BJJ master, is a friend, and you know, my kids go to his dojo sometimes for BJJ, and I teach them Close Quarter Combat Sambo. And he asked a similar question. I said, well, put your students in a vehicle. I said, in the vehicle, it's close quarter, you can't run away. Someone pulls a gun or a knife on you. Small vehicle, large SUV. Let's not teach them the principles yet, but let's see what their answers are, and then we'll teach them the principles. And they got to fight. The gun pointed you outside, gun pointed in, because in undercover work, and this is from the States too, ATF, DEA, and gun and gangs, and like myself in North America, all the violence is in and around the vehicle. So imagine if you're getting carjacked. We did that one scenario with the dojo, it's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu dojo, right? And Muay Thai dojo. I said, so someone's trying to rip your steal. Someone's trying to rip your cable back car. Someone's trying to, all these scenarios. You're in the Walmart. Someone's pretending, right? They got the rape van, the cube van, parks beside you. You're helping. Someone tries to get you in the car. Someone tries to get in your car, to pull a gun up. What are you going to do? So if you can actually put them in scenarios in your dojo, whether it's outside in the parking lot we've done or inside, sit on the bench inside. They have benches. You know, come out the washroom, be in the office. We have people pretending to be in the office working for the master. I'm going to attack you when you're sitting down on a chair. How would you fight? I mean, there's no rules. I'm not going to wait till you stand up. So we just put them in those type of situations. You try to open their mind, and we call it, the JTF2 call it visual slides. I call it just visualization. As you know, I don't have to tell you gentlemen, and Greg always used to tell me, combat is at least 75% mental, 25% physical, and your brain, the synapses doesn't know the difference. So if you can put them in those scenarios training, then maybe they will have the answer if it actually happened.
I love that. I'm really glad I asked you that. Well, I used to be a lifeguard, and you would learn the basic techniques of CPR, etc. But then we do sits, and you couldn't be a lifeguard until you passed a certain number of sits. And we'd literally have people walk into a pool where there were 6 people around the pool. One's electrocuted, one's got blood all over them, fake ketchup, and you really saw the difference between someone slowly doing CPR or someone having to react in a moment with an alarm going off. I really love that as part of someone's martial arts training.
Oh, that's good, yeah.
It is time for your 10 questions, Sensei. These are the questions we ask our guests. We ask that you answer as impulsively as you can, but then feel free to break open your answer as you wish.
Sure.
What's the most effective move in your martial arts arsenal?
I think confidence to walk away, to de-escalate verbally.
Who is the most influential martial artist in your life?
2, but the longest would be Greg Kalina, my Russian master.
And do you want to mention the other?
Jan Crayfeld, like we talked, obviously, yeah, I owe him tremendously, but for a length of time, I was with Greg longer, but yes, definitely Jan and Greg.
Right on. Who do you think is the most influential martial artist of all time, and why?
In my lifetime, I want to say Bruce Lee, but I'll say my pick Judo Jean LaBelle.
What excites you most about the next 5 years of your training?
Just being able to promote the defense system, but also inspiring my kids. They like martial arts and trying to give the love to martial arts to my son and daughter.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you get there?
Oh, that maybe I was a good man and I was able to help people and be a good father and husband.
Do you have a favorite film and television martial artist, whether they're great at real martial arts or not?
American Ninja, was that in the mid-80s?
Eh.
And one that you might not know, TC 2000 with Billy Blanks. I think it was in the early 90s. I had a family friend that was in that movie. He was the giant. So I have a kindred spirit.
Right on.
Love Billy Blanks. Love Billy Blanks.
Yeah.
I actually got to meet him. Sorry to interrupt. I actually got to meet
yeah.
him Hanshi Tarians, Capital Conquest. I was teaching up there, and Billy was there, and I got a picture, and so it was great getting to meet him.
When was that? When?
And Jean-Yves Theriault, the real champ, met him. That was 2022.
We were there.
We were there.
Yeah, we would have just missed you.
Yeah. Billy said to me, this is my claim to fame about Billy Blanks. He said, "You remind me of the young GSP."
Oh,
and I said, you know, I'm 10 years older than him. And Billy said, "I know, you remind me of the young one."
That's a good compliment.
Sensei, what martial artist, living or dead, in all recorded history would you like to train with the most?
I actually, if I could have met my Master Greg's in Russia in the Special Forces, there's 2 that he talked about. If I could have went back and trained with them, his instructors, I would love to do that.
If everyone in the world could have the greatest benefit martial arts has given you, whether they train or not, what benefit would they be getting?
I think confidence and then be able to act under pressure properly. Make the right decisions when your heart rate goes over 200 beats per minute, under 75, to make a good decision under stress.
Greatest achievement, greatest regret.
Being a father, I think, would be my greatest achievement. Not joining the military before I became a cop, because I had so many influential military cop and Jan and Greg. Yeah, I would have went back in time and joined the military first and then transferred to police.
Right on. Thanks for your 10 questions, Sensei. Yeah, Sensei Nova.
Sean, I just want to say, every past guest and every future guest should watch these 10 questions and answer them just like that.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Sensei Suino, I'm going to ask you a question, and then I'm going to throw it back to Sensei Duncan. He mentioned a word twice, confidence, and he said something really significant. The confidence to walk away. Now, I know you as a child got into some judo because you were getting into some scraps, and that was part of the deal. So you're getting into fight. But I also know you as a very calm and controlled and reserved gentleman who can decide whether he fights or not. So how important is confidence to walk away?
I think it's important. I think we can all agree on that, especially as young men. We're rash. We have a little bit of that spark. If we enjoy the fight, if we enjoy the violence a little bit, I think a lot of us do. I think more confidence is better. Over time, you get to the point where you have a little wisdom and you understand the consequences of that, right? Or even if you feel like you're going to prevail and there won't be any consequences, you understand that it's not always time to spend that ability. Sometimes it's time to save it. So, yeah, I think confidence is really important. For me, confidence and wisdom come as a piece. They're a parcel. The smarter I get, smart's not the good word. The older I get, the less smart I get. But the more wisdom I get, the more confident I get to walk away from a fight. I don't care what the other people think about that, right? It needs to be up to me.
Thanks, Sensei. Yeah, going back to you, Sensei Duncan. I mean, normally we think as young people, especially me, I want the confidence to fight. And I just love the way you said the confidence to walk away. So do you want to break that open at all?
Yeah, it's like I said, when I met Jan, I liked, well, we call it fugitive apprehension. I like to hunt people. I'm not a hunter, but I'm excellent at hunting people, whether they're wanted for murder in different cities and stuff like that. But what Jan and Greg taught me was, and Greg actually put this in perspective. He said, the ability to have confidence to show mercy. So I'd say, what do you mean? To show mercy, to be able to walk away, knowing that you could really hurt this individual, but having the ability to walk away. And even if they think they won, and I remember one time, the steroid big guy, I was going to gun and gangs, I was on the 401, long story short, I don't know, I don't think I cut him off or anything, but he was in a Jeep and he pushed me off the road and he wanted to fight. And the fire in me just wanted to take him out, but I'm thinking, then I took a breath, remember what Greg always said, what are the ramifications about this, right? We're on the side of the highway, it's not gonna look good, someone's gonna get my plate, I'm going to work, how do I explain this? I'm gonna get in trouble, blah, blah. So it gave me the finger, he thought he won, but I remember what Greg said, give him some mercy, who cares? Like you said, Sensei, and just let him go, right? So I think the ability to show mercy in different situations, even though you can affect and hurt that person. And he also said, as you get older, like you said, the body is very fragile. And you learn that as you get older. So why put yourself in situations if you don't have to? Because the human body is fragile.
Thanks for that. Hanshi Legacy, I wouldn't mind your take on this. You know, I meet you in 1993 and I realized, oh my God, I am going to gain the confidence to fight. But what does the confidence to walk away mean?
Well, yeah, you could get yourself into a lot of trouble by doing that, depending on how it's all happening. If you're looking at it on a street level, if you accidentally hurt somebody badly and you go to jail, etc. But being a martial artist, you have a certain amount of responsibility and you have certain duties. And what you try to do as a martial artist is to make mankind better. And if you fall into those holes or ruts like with everybody else, you're not making all of mankind better. You're not adding, you're taking away. So I think it's very important just being a human being.
Thanks, Hanshi. That's not why I came to karate, but that's definitely the greatest gift that karate's given me is a path toward that. We have a great question that came in here. I think Andre is running the show tonight, and he said, when you were providing protective services at the 2010 Toronto G20 Summit, which got pretty hairy for those of you who might not know watching, how different was that experience compared to your other security services?
Sensei Duncan, before you answer, Andre is a Russian.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, like he came to my dojo and he was like 10 years old and he didn't want to give up his green belt in judo. And so he's interested in what you have to say about this.
Yeah, well, yeah, G20 was we did some terrorism thing 2 weeks before that, and then did that file, and then arrested that individual, and then we were doing covert ops with the Mounties, and not to give up tradecraft, but we infiltrated basically. Well, I could say this because it's old now. The black bloc from that came back down from Montreal that caused all the stuff. So we're doing intel. We infiltrated them, and we're around them for the whole time and giving up intel. When other officers, there's a difference between plainclothes and true undercover. So if someone just wears normal clothes, and there might be an undercover unit, but they're not to limit them, they're not real undercover. So cops were getting picked off here and there because they had counter surveillance, but our teams had to blend in and do stuff like that. But it was pretty chaos. We were shot with because we were with them by the rubber bullets. You know, I had colleagues that were beat up that they thought were by our own people, right? Because they were really trying to hurt the police. So yeah, it was just maybe really to there was undercovers there. We were giving intel, and not to give up our size, but we were in the mix, and even at Spadina and where we're kettling, where they were going to tear gas us, we had to be in there. So they treated us like we were one of them, right? And that's the juice of it, is that when you can fool, because there's people asking you your background story, and when you can fool people that do it for a living, and they believe that you're part of them, that's the juice, we call it, and that's kind of why I guess everyone does it.
Let's talk about the juice, and you know, I'd love for you. We've touched on it a lot, but just tell us how you found the commitment to not give up the truth in all these undercover operations. And did it ever get close? Did it ever get real close where you thought, I've blown it, this is it?
Yeah, I guess when you get it, it's like any other job, whether it's martial arts or whatever job you have, whether it's acting or whatever job you have in life, when you find something you're good at or you like. I got a taste of undercover work when I went to the drug squad, and then I went to gun and gangs and covert ops, the real and operations, and I just loved the camaraderie, the teams. We were like the special forces of undercover work. Our team, everyone complement each other, and there's nothing that we couldn't do. And in terms of and the more I did it, the more I wanted to do it. It was hard, you know, in the late 40s, just to be more of a mentor, a teacher, and then because there's different generations that come after you and kind of pass the torch like people did to us. But in terms of danger, yeah, I'd say I had about 5 to 10, well, real where I went home and I shouldn't have been alive, where your ass puckers up. The first time I was robbed at gunpoint, my team didn't come because the old hardware listening devices didn't work, and it wasn't their fault. And then you know, I've never had a gun pointed at me the way we train in the traditional dojo. And this is the principles, knowing the principles, and Greg taught me. So the first time I got robbed at gunpoint was I was buying crack in a bad place, and we didn't know that they were home invaded with ski masks. 3 weeks later, they don't tell that to police. So I knocked on the door, had my story. He comes out with a gun and robs me. Shit got real, excuse my language, from 0 to 100. Find myself 50 feet in a complex in a apartment building. Make a long story short, I'm putting up the signals. No one's coming. I'm saying it on my pack. No one's coming. They robbed me, searched me. And I thought, Phil, just calm down. And you do self-talk. I thought I was going to die. I'm like, why is my backup coming? And they eventually did and let me work through it. But he had in his pocket. And I remember Greg saying, it was like a voice, just get off the line. Just get off the line, and actually help me because it was in his pocket. And he had a point at me. It was a revolver, right? So I got to the side. I was going to hit him in the throat if I had to. All these things happened. And then, because I visualized, and then the next time a gun was pointed at me, it was by Russian mafia, drove in a strip bar. And then the next time was in Jane and Finch with gangsters pointing the gun when I'm doing surveillance of the gun, talk my way to that. And then another time, someone tries to shoot through a backpack at me, but I hit him in the throat and articulate why, because he sprayed the day before Jane Finch and they're battling. So every time, and then I'd go home, and my coping mechanism was my dog. I would just walk with my dog, and when you're in the moment, you don't realize how stressful. And then when you go home and a couple of days later, you go, wow, I'm just lucky to get through that, and rely on yourself and your team. And then my Russian master, to end it, in my late 40s, says, enough's enough, Phil. You're doing too much dangerous work. And for him to tell me, and my wife, and then one day, one guy killed 4 people that summer, and shot the guy, if I could say that, in the head, and killed him. The 4th guy, and they wanted me to be the principal undercover, and I sat in my seat. I was an instructor at the college, still doing the cover work. I took a breath and I said, this is the day. Squash your ego, Phil. It's time to grow up. You're in the late 40s. You shouldn't be going after 15 to 20-year-old gangsters. And I called my buddy back, who's in charge of covert ops, and said no. And then I just was a mentor. And I still remember that was the day I said, you got to squash. We need the ego, but you're also going to realize that the ego enough's enough, right? You got to know when it's time.
What kind of come down did that take? I mean, you got to have some PTSD going on with all that, or was it just your dog, or did you grab some therapy? I mean, whether anybody's been in those deadly situations or not, anything that heightened has got to have some version of a.
Yeah, not PTSD, but one of the things Jan Crayfield and Greg Kalina taught me, my masters, the military guys, taught me to have coping mechanisms.
Mm.
So right now it's my family, martial arts, dogs, I like animals, and the people. So I never had, well, I guess everyone might have some type of PTSD, but I do have stomach issues from doing 20, 30-hour shifts in the car and doing all that. So there is you're right, you can't come unscathed, but I think I did pretty well compared to other ones that went to alcohol. Unfortunately, I've lost friends to drugs, some people to suicide. But because I had those 2 mentors tell me, have something to do. Some people have golf, have some coping some hobbies that can kind of. But then again, I'm kind of vigilant. I do counter surveillance. If we live near a park. If I just did it today. I watch people in their doors. I do surveillance. There's things that you can't really get out, not as much. But if I see you 2 times driving, then I dust you off. It's called do counter surveillance. So there's some things. You're right. It's probably not. That might be PTSD when I'm following people, right? But that's my thing. And then I feel okay. And then sometimes it's an old couple, right? If I see the same plate follow me, like I said, 2 days in a row, or I'll be following them. But yeah, that's probably what my PTSD is.
Sensei, I was not undercover, but I probably did about as many drug deals as you. And I can go anywhere, any town, and clock who's doing what and where to score. And I haven't done that in almost 2 decades. You just don't, I don't lose it. You just like, yep, there's the handoff, yep.
Yeah.
It is what it is. So talk to us about now, you've moved to this mentor role for a decade and or close. Where does the martial arts fit in for you today? What do you see going forward, and what excites you most about what you're working on in life right now?
So yeah, before my mentor Greg passed away, my master, a couple of years, like in 2017, he brought me to the old master in Boston. He'd been in his mid-80s, Michael Galperin. So we're under the United States Combat Sambo Association, and he allowed. I thought it was very humbling, pick a couple other students in the class, but he picked me to be a successor in case something happened. But he, like Jan, didn't want to promote it. And then the older man, Grandmaster said, Phil, you should help promote with Greg. So he gave me the okay to promote it. So so I really like that, identifying good instructors. We have a couple, Perry, who I'm humbled, who was my instructor, is now my student, which is weird because I learned so much from him, right, from 1990 over. And then, and just having an ability, right now I have a consulting company on the side. So I train bodyguards, military, police, security, special constables, right down to civilians. So depending on what they need, if they need a higher principals and their job is military or special forces, then that's fine. or if they're just a civilian and they don't need that kind of training and they just need some self-defense just like anyone else. So I just like people to learn and feel safe and kind of that's why I took this other job in Hamilton, right? In charge of safety. So anything to do with safety, like everyone here, and trying to keep people investigations, right, and anything like that. So I really like the training and mentoring part. And I'm always learning. I'm a life student. I always like going to seminars. I call it research to see how people attack, how people's systems are. And I really like to open my horizons. I'm a white belt for life, I would like to think. I'm always learning.
So you've obviously got nothing but love for the martial arts. If you were to look at the broad picture of martial arts today compared to having begun, if I'm not mistaken, in the 80s, obvious, deep, real world experience, what would you say is the best thing about martial arts today? And what would you like to see change?
I think the best thing, I'll start with that, is the lifestyle, people that go into martial arts, right? Getting the confidence like we talked about, and different generations, grandparents, I'm hoping to start that this is the lineage of our family, my kids. I like how popular some arts are, even though maybe only 1 to 3 or 5% of the population does martial arts. It seems, you see in movies. Some of the negative things, I don't think there's any bad martial art or person, but I think there's a lot of people just teaching theory. I think a lot of things are watered down. I think sometimes people aren't training realistically, or they have unrealistic expectations. I think the male ego is very fragile. I'll come across people, and I'm not saying better if you defeat them. Only 2 people defeated me, and that was who I trained under, Jan and Greg, right? I became their student. I wanted to know why, and please let me be your student. But depending on the person, more than not, some people just pretend that this didn't happen, and then they go on their life. And I don't get that, right? If someone can beat me or show me something, I want to learn and see how you did it. But yeah, there's a lot of theory. There's a lot of people that claim a lot of fakes too, unfortunately. Like a lot of everyone that you meet is special forces, and instead of just saying they did 2 years, which is honorable in the military, or like undercover. I'll know in 30 seconds if you're full of crap, you weren't undercover. You might have been in, wore plainclothes, we call it, or old clothes, which is still good. You're a cop, but you weren't undercover. Just like you weren't. So I wish people just stayed in their lane, and not everyone needs to know our skills maybe, but yeah, there's a lot of I don't want to say crap, but a lot of things that wouldn't really work on the street. But maybe that's not what they need to train for, I guess.
Sensei Dauphin, I see you nodding. You have a different path in your martial arts, but what do you like most about what you see today, and what do you find to be something you would change if you could?
When I teach seminars, actually at Capital Conquest, last time when I taught at Capital Conquest, one of the things I said was, don't depend on somebody else to participate in your fantasy.
Nice.
Right. And that's what I think a big problem in martial arts is that these rules of engagement and these people like build this whole world around in their mind of how it's going to be, and it's not going to be like that. I'm sorry, there won't be a referee. Your best jump spinning back kick is not going to be the thing that's going to save your ass. 75% mental, 25% physical, but I think the 25% physical needs to build that 75% mental. Like, that's a symbiotic thing, right? Like when you train, it has to be like, I did this thing so hard physically that now it's made my mind a way that is different. Yeah, I don't know. There's just too much people who are full of shit and not willing to actually sweat and push themselves to the point where they're sore and tired and deal with that shit. Like, yeah, that's it for me, Sean.
Thanks, Sensei. Hanchi, let's go to you next. What do you like most about when you look at the big picture of the martial arts out there, and what's one thing you'd want to change?
Sorry, I got caught. I was writing something down that I heard. If I had one thing to pick, I guess it would be to try to cut out the people that are they're running dojos just for the money, as opposed to, like, I always say that probably 85-90% of the dojos are not real dojos out there. They're in it for the money. But giving the people who go into being martial artists their money's worth. You know, it's like Randy often says, any one of those people could be probably the next, we'll say, Bruce Lee, but you know, somebody could shy them away or turn them away just because of the garbage that they're teaching. You know, that's why I like lineage, classical karate, because you're not just teaching your blowing up ideas, but you're handing down ideas from masters that went before you, and they're getting the full, real impact of the martial arts. So I guess I would like to change the people that are watering down the arts for their own ego or pleasure.
Thanks, Hanchi. And to you, Sensei Suino, same question.
Let me focus on the positive. I'll tell you a few things I really, really like. I love the creativity that UFC has brought out, that MMA has brought out. When you watch BJJ matches or judo matches at the highest level, the sophistication and creativity of those players is just astonishing. They're athletic, right? They're better athletes than they've ever been. Their nutrition is better. Their coaching is better. Their mindset is better. And the moves they do are just amazing. Now, I realize that's sport martial art, but I think there's a lot of takeaways from that. You know, when you do something amazing in the sport environment, it doesn't mean it translates directly. But if we can walk around at 75% that level of athleticism and 75% that level of intensity and skill, I think we're going to be doing okay in most encounters for self-defense. So I actually love the fact that martial arts is blown wide open with the media, with UFC, with the availability of all the different sport categories and all the different places we can go. To me, that's just a positive thing. That doesn't mean there's not, you know, a fair amount of bullshit aligned with it as well. But one of the beauties of what we get to do on this show and what we get to do in our lives is sift through it, right? See what's good and what's bad, figure out what we want to be a part of, and keep raising our game. So yeah, if I'm focusing on the positive, I think we're in a pretty cool place in terms of the opportunity to see some amazing stuff right now.
It's awesome. I'm going to answer real briefly before we go around the horn and talk our way out of the show. It's the two sides of the same coin, you know, mostly because of UFC, but also just the internet and YouTube, etc. Your average person, you know, the casual person knows about and loves martial arts. Like there's this grand awareness, whether they take it or not, there's this deep respect and engagement with martial arts in a way that I really do think it's the internet. That's also the negative, is that your average casual thinks they know certain things based off of some YouTube videos or podcasts, but they've never touched or felt or sweat or been hit or hit. And so to me, it's two sides of the same coin. With that great awareness and excitement comes a lot of super uninformed opinions, which wouldn't matter, except it guides groupthink. And then groupthink makes people think X is true and Y isn't, with no actual experience or knowledge. Ladies and gentlemen, time is real. I think we're all feeling the pain of time right now, because I don't know any of us on this call who wouldn't mind chatting longer. But I want to say thank you to Robert Schlumsky, Justin Shea, Andrei Sadishev, Alden Adair, Jesse Villay-Vitao, Sydney Dauphin, Josh Kitchens, Christiana Landel, Daniel J. Holland, Drita Giuliani, and Stavros Stavroulias. We don't have this show without our behind-the-scenes friends. And I do want to shout out that next week, 1:30 Eastern Time, we got a special time with Laurie O'Connell, because she's going to be coming on and can't be here for the night. So you'll obviously be able to watch it asynchronously. But if you want to come for that Zoom, 1:30. So we're going to go around the horn right now, and we're basically going to talk about our time. And then the last word, Sensei Duncan, will go to you. Hanchi Legacy, what do you want to say about our night?
It's an incredible night. You're one of our very best guests. I found you to be honest, level-headed, and credible. And should I ever be in the street, you're the person I don't want to be back to back with.
Well, thank you. That's an honor, seriously, for someone like you to tell me that. Well, thank you.
Well, I hope to see you soon, maybe at another Capital Conquest, or are you going to Lévis at all? The Quebec,
Not Quebec. I was there in 2023, again at Capital Conquest. I don't know if Terry will have me back later this year. If I'm not even instructing, I'll see you in November. I'll make sure I come if you're there
looking forward to it.
too.
Thank you for being our guest.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Hanchi. Sensei Suino.
Thank you so much for coming on. I love the vector of this conversation. Talked a little bit of outside some of the things that we normally discuss in terms of your police work and undercover. Fascinating stuff. Thanks for the conversation about Sistema and Sambo. We don't hear about those arts a lot on our show, so I'm really grateful that you were able to share some firsthand knowledge and talk about your mentors in that well. I'm really delighted that you mentioned Judo Gene LaBelle. I love that guy and his history. He's an incredible innovator and talented man, and he also there's more cool stories about him than just about anybody in the world of martial arts. And then toward the end, you said, "I'm a white belt for life," and I feel the same way, man. It's always too soon to stop learning. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sensei Suino. Sensei Dauphin.
Hey, man, Judo Gene LaBelle. He made the deadliest man on the planet pee his pants, right? So,
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
We know it's real. No one will confirm it. He won't.
I like right off the hop, you said, create positive witnesses. This is something I've thought about so many times. And I've actually been advised by law enforcement officers that I won't name that if you knock somebody unconscious and knock all their teeth out, make sure you scream at the top of your lungs, "I'm afraid, get away from me," right? Because the people that are witnessing won't remember the order of events. So I like that you said that. Create positive witnesses. My mom was 18 when I was born too. I had young parents. So you said that. That resonated. My mom, it was you, it was your dad. Me, it was my mom. Didn't want me to do martial arts. She said, "You're getting too many fights already." So the boxing gym was the only place that would take me in without paying lots of money. So I'm on your dad's side, and I know a sense of legacy is because we both love Muhammad Ali. His picture hangs in my dojo, and love that guy. But I do, your mom's favorite, Ken Norton. Really good guy. I got a really great picture of Ken Norton and Muhammad Ali in Wrigley Field running, and they're wearing like dress shoes and socks. Like, and it's just very interesting. Ken Norton, great boxer too. I'm not sure why your brother went to the Olympics 2 times, but I'd like to find that out maybe when you wrap up. I like when you said that your first opponent quit before you would quit. So it was in your mind to quit, but you were just tenacious enough to not quit. I love that. Rugby, you can hit people without equipment. I want to do it. That's good. I like that too. I wrote so much stuff. I'm going to have to jump over some of it. I like the stuff you said about survival mindset. You talked so much about Greg Kalina and Jan Crawford. Your reverence for those two men is incredible. I'm really pleased to hear somebody like you talk about two people like that. I like that you said, Jen Cranfeld said, "People are going to try and kill you. You need to come to my class." That's a different level of confidence about instruction, right? People are going to try and kill you. You better come to me. I'll help you with that. Takes a wolf to catch a wolf. A look breaks a man. Sensei Legacy taught me that too. They're so silent thunder. Just don't say anything. Just stare them down while they're talking. If you're just quiet and keep looking at them, not like you've done it thousands of times. I've done it like 3 times, but it actually works. If you can just stare at somebody, they figure it out pretty quick. I like you said, the loser bleeds. I would like to also add that sometimes the winner does too, right? Right, the loser and the winner sometimes bleed. when you were talking about Sistema and Sambo, I like you made a real clear differentiator between sport and close quarter combat. You're really clear that sport is different, not bad. Like you didn't portray it in a bad light, just that it's something different than close quarter combat. Sensei Legacy said confidence. That was the thing he said he hoped people would take away from martial arts. God would say a good man, a good father, and a good husband. All the men on this call aspire to that. We all hope we hear those same words. We already talked about Judo Jean LaBelle. Yes. Interesting. Your regret is not joining the military. That's a first. You said that you're excellent at hunting people. If you ever come across the license plate Shorin 2 times, that's me. I'm not trying to follow you. I'm just trying to have a coffee with you. So don't
Sounds good.
just
Hi, give me a couple of times to stop.
okay, just chill out. If you see that plate 2 times, just chill out. It's me. Okay. You said the male ego is fragile. I like that. Since Serino and I were talking about ego, and I said it's really good if the ego works for you, but you shouldn't work for the ego, right? Like if the ego drives you to do good things, that's a good thing. But if you're working for your ego, that's not. And the last thing I want to say is you said it multiple times. You said, my master, my master, my master. It's really awesome that you have a master, that you think of that, because I do. I know all of the martial artists on this call think of our masters. So thank you so much for coming on. I love this conversation tonight.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And if I can say, I'm very honored. Like I said, I want to commend all of you for having this platform. The ones I'm going to be listening to all your episodes, right, in the next month. I listened to 4 in the last 2 days. If I can say about my master, I really appreciate, because that's how we all feel about a master. I named my son after Greg. I made his middle name Kalina. And I have a tattoo. I'm the only one in the class got a tattoo of his crest of our system years ago. And like I said, he lived with me for 4 years. We lived together in between me breaking up with girlfriends and meeting my wife. And like you said, I hope that I'm like, I don't want to get sensitive here, because I'm not a sensitive guy, but I hope he's looking down and approves, right? And I think this show is one, is helping everyone and helping me and helping him see that it's happening, right? And just quickly for my brother, he went for track and field. He went to 96 and 2000 for track and field. He went to the States. He was an 8-time All-American in track, long jump, triple and long. And I never had any track genes, right? Like this, but he got that the track, right? I got the fighting skills. He got the running skills. So it's good.
Sensei Duncan, sorry, normally you get the last word, but I just want to say I named my son after Sensei Legacy's teacher. My son's name is Benny, named after Benny Allen. So
Awesome.
yeah,
Awesome.
I'm gonna come to Toronto. We're gonna get a coffee. I want to.
Sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sensei. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Wonderful chat. We'll see you at 1:30 next Thursday. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Sensei.